So, my dear ones, namaste and good morning. July, we have a new theme. I'm going to have to wear these today. Print isn't big enough. So, happy Sunday. Happy July. Hard to believe we're halfway through this year already. Um, that scares me when I say that. We are continuing with the Centers for Spiritual Living theme for the year. That theme is rising higher, growing deeper. And this month we've got this theme called um, rolling in the deep. And it really is a deep dive into our connection with spirit, into our histories, personal and spiritual, and our spiritual DNA. And I have to admit to you that this topic was one that I had no previous knowledge about. And so it's been a bit of a steep learning curve to step into this. I understand the concepts, but the context was a bit different. So roll with me, if you will. So July's theme, rolling in the deep. It actually, Rolling in the Deep is the name of a popular song by the artist Adele. If you probably have heard it, maybe didn't realize what the words were. I didn't. I had to look it up. But her song deals with personal relationships with one other. And ours, of course, is about the relationship with the infinite and with each other. And so we step beyond the individual experience. Taking a deep dive into our experience with spirit is the spiritual basis. It's also about our human experience of the strengths that we've accumulated, the traumas we've resolved, and the knowledge and skills that we've developed as a result of our life experiences. So I'll lay the foundation for rolling in the deep, and then I need to move to our Sunday lesson, which is Remember with the River Dolphins. So I'll expand on that in a moment. But first, I'm going to talk about the qualities and insights we inherited from our ancestors, both abilities and our disabilities or our limitations. Second, about embracing our personal power, the ability to recognize circumstances that are limiting and shift our focus to move around those obstacles and still thrive. And third, taking a serious stock about the narratives, the stories we tell ourselves, or we allow ourselves to live by and with, things that really aren't true, but historically have been sort of imposed on areas of the population, including a lot of the female population in the world. And then beginning to rewrite those stories so that they make sense to us and for us and actually align with the truth of who we are. So I want to start first with looking at rolling in the deep. And I'm going to just read what the Centers for Spiritual Living paperwork has, or offices have provided to us. And it's a rather lengthy reading, and I'm sorry about that, but I want to make sure you get all the nuances here. So from CSL, this month, we delve into the depths of the ocean and the profound wisdom of historically marginalized and oppressed people. Okay. By diving below the surface, we uncover the richness that lies beyond superficial understanding. The ocean, with its vast darkness, becomes a place of safety and a powerful teaching tool. Here, we reframe light and dark, not just good and bad, but as essential elements to the ebb and flow of life. Balance doesn't mean everything is in perfect proportion. It's about recognizing the unique contributions of different elements and perspectives. We question stereotypes, exploring the myths and realities surrounding, for example, sharks, who, like many marginalized groups, are often misunderstood and unfairly treated. Learning from our ancestors, we honor their resilience and wisdom while preparing to pass on these lessons to future generations. This theme encourages us to embrace the unknown, appreciate the hidden depths, and find strength and safety in the darkness, promoting a more inclusive and nuanced understanding of our world. That's quite an idea to get our heads around, but expanding on these ideas, in the Living the Science of Mind, Dr. Holmes wrote, "Wherever deep cries unto deep, deep answers deep." He expands on that idea by citing Troward. He said, "Troward said it this way: as the individual opens himself to the universal seems to pour itself into the individual, resulting in expanded individualization of consciousness." So below the surface of the ocean, below the surface, or in our example of the ocean or of consciousness, there's a dimension not easily seen with the untrained eye or felt by the uninitiated or perhaps even the callous consciousness. We would interpret this to be spirit, the essence of its nature, which we believe expresses through, in, and as each one of us. Okay. Dr. Holmes writes that there is something that hears and responds to the deepest yearnings, impulses, and desires within us. The deep that's within us calls to the deep in the infinite, and something responds to that. An energy, an intelligence, a responsive force. Okay. And I don't know that we have anything quite like that in the tangible physical world. In the Science of Mind magazine for this month, excuse me. And I turn to that because sometimes there's some tidbits of wisdom that help expand on the concepts that we're asked to look at over the month. In this month's Science of Mind, our spiritual leader, Dr. Sunny Cantrell Smith, wrote a short blurb about a personal experience that she equates to the energy of the deep calling to the energy on the surface. I'm going to share that little story with you. In Appalachia, my father often helped other farmers search for water with his divining rod. I remember watching him walk slowly across open fields, holding that forked stick in both hands, his arms relaxed, but his eyes focused, waiting. The rod, usually made from a Y-shaped branch or hazel or willow, would suddenly dip or twist when he crossed a place where water flowed underground. To me, it felt like magic. To my father, it was a skill, a sacred trust between him, the earth, and something greater. So I don't know if you believe in such things, but deep calls to deep. And it sounds like Dr. Sunny's dad had a connection with the energy of something moving under the surface of the land. And he believed that rod that he held in his hand would show him where that energy was. We know there's an energy that underlies everything that we do, an intelligence. And when we consciously seek that, we're going a deep dive, rolling in the deep. Okay. And that's what this lesson is this particular month, and what we'll be talking about as we move through all of our lessons. So when I also, part of this lesson today, ask us to contemplate our histories, our personal histories. Okay. And as we dive into the ultimate consciousness of being, that on the way down, we might take a pause and look at some of the images of our family, like what our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents, and back and back and back in history had as their experiences, and what those experiences, both good and maybe challenging, and probably it's the challenging ones that are the most imprinting on us, what they left on us as spiritual DNA. And I'll elaborate on that in just a moment, but the strengths that we gathered, how we overcame some of the difficult times, the difficult challenges, and how that caused us to evolve, to adapt. Okay. As I said, this is kind of a meaty lesson today. So we start with this concept that every one of us hosts the divine presence. And spiritually, we've been gathering all this information and growing in depth and understanding. So both on a human level, all of the acquisitions, the history, the adaptations, the evolution of our personal families, and the spiritual evolution that we've experienced, all of those cause us to grow and are a part of this deep dive that we're getting into. So we're going to be looking this month at all of the experiences, both the happy and the ones that were challenging. And I think we're called to do that maybe in the silence, the inner silence, and maybe perhaps to pay attention to our sense of things as we move through these lessons, our feelings about those things, the insights that we get as we move through this rolling in the deep over the space of these next few weeks. Okay. It's really not a head journey. I'll just say that. It's a journey of the heart and the soul and the spirit. So diving into the deep. Okay. So we're going to do this little shift and come over here to remember with the river dolphins. So much of the context for today's lesson is drawn from a book called Undrowned: Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals by Alexis Pauline Gumbs. To be perfectly honest, I have not read the entire book. I did read one of the opening chapters on Google Books. Reviews of the book say the book draws heavily on the behaviors, social structures, and ecological notes of marine mammals, such as whales and dolphins, to provide lessons about resilience, community, and survival. Okay. And this lesson today draws on the river dolphins. Now, the dolphins I'm most familiar with are the beautiful, the intelligent, the fast, beautiful, fun bottlenose dolphins that we see depicted in documentaries, films about marine life, ocean-going mammals. And the ocean-going mammals, the dolphins that we usually see, roam the oceans of the planet. They're in every single ocean on the face of the planet, with the exception of the frigid waters of the Arctic and the Antarctic. They don't go there, too cold for them. The river dolphins, and I honestly did not realize there were river dolphins, but we're going to learn more about them. The river dolphins, in contrast, live only in the rivers of South America and Asia in fresh water as opposed to seawater. River dolphins, it is believed, originated from the same group of ocean dwelling dolphins that we know that are found all over the world. They, for some reason, found their way into the rivers of South America and Asia and stayed. Don't know why. But over time, they adapted to their surroundings, um, to the narrower waterways, the murky water, and just physically being in a limited space by the margins of the river versus the vastness of the ocean. And over the centuries, they physically evolved to have a different physical structure. They look slightly different. There you have a smaller snout, smaller eyes, smaller body, just smaller all over. But they do have some of the same qualities and abilities that ocean-going dolphins have. They rely on echolocation, or what they call biosonar, to find where they're at and to find out what's going on around them when they can't see. And that helps them to navigate in the murky waters of freshwater rivers or estuaries. So there's your biology lesson for today. So to give you kind of a context of the notes from CSL this morning, I'm going to read you a bit from Alexis Gumb's writing. It has to do significantly with what we're talking about today. Gives you a context. She writes, I wonder what it means for an ocean dolphin to swim up a river. The bottlenose has a range across the whole planet, the whole open ocean, and yet sometimes they will choose the boundaries and specifically of a river. Brackish water, narrow shores. Why? The message for me today is about specificity, about choosing a lane with all my infinite potential, about how my world-traveling grandmother made a commitment to a small island, about how strong we grow sometimes swimming upstream, about what the world can learn from the visibility of our message in a context that is specific enough to ring clear, and to trust that all water touches all water everywhere. And for all of you, ocean dolphins, wondering, what am I doing in this river full of mud? Remember why Harriet Tubman went south? She didn't have to. She was skilled and untraceable. She could have been individually free, unencumbered. But if she wanted to tell an everlasting truth about freedom that would ring across the planet, a message for the ages, she had to live free in unfree space. It was the only way to bring us all with her. Thank you, my loves, for the bravery of your freedom in spaces of clear limitation, in spaces of muddy reality. Thank you for your decisions to do not what you could do, but what you must. Thank you for teaching the difference between privilege and courage, escape and transcendence, reaction and revolution. Your endurance inscribes an eternal alternative carried by bottles and bottlenoses, blood and breath. Message honored. Message received. That's a lot to wrap your head around. I had to read it several times. Her words conjure for me a feeling of fire in the soul. I don't know about you, but I just get this fire in the soul. She sees the river dolphins as having a choice to leave the constraints of the river and go back to the wide open sea. But they don't. She uses that as a metaphor for the brave souls in the marginalized community. And specifically, she's writing now for the Black women of the world, who, despite having their own personal freedom, stay where they are in life and in community and continue to work with and for their sisters. So all of them have the choice and opportunity to live in freedom. Let that settle with you just a moment. Unless we've had the experience ourselves, I think it might be understandably difficult to put ourselves in the place of someone who feels unseen and unheard, or further denied. If we listen closely and we allow our hearts to really feel and listen, we can get a sense of what a part of our human community is feeling and what they're called to do in the world for the greater good. Well, this is specifically about a marginalized segment. I think we can maybe put our heads around some of the things that we as females in the world feel, because we haven't had the vote for that long. We haven't been able to have credit cards for that long. We haven't been able to buy a house for that long. So I think we can understand that there are parts of our totality that are feeling, who have found freedom, but are coming back into a situation so that they can take others to a sense of freedom. And we'll learn some more about that here as the lesson unfolds. Part of what I think fuels the fire I sense coming from Alexis Gumb's work is the historical experiences of Black women. And she uses her research into the lives of marine mammals and their adaptations and their resilience to conditions as a metaphor for the history and background of her Black ancestors. I think we can identify with that. The river dolphins, for example, were ocean-going dolphins many thousands of years ago, but the conditions and circumstances led them to swim to a freshwater river, and for whatever reason, they ended up staying there. As a result, over the centuries, the dolphins adapted and evolved and learned how to live in the confined spaces and murky waters of the river. Okay. If we observed any marginalized segment of our population, women, immigrants, gay, any of those, we see adaptation to their circumstances, just simply so they can survive in the world, okay? Adaptation so they can survive. For the community of Black women that she writes for, they are survivors, the offspring of populations that survived a sea crossing in the bottom of a boat. They were the strong ones who survived. And once they were on land, they survived being required to serve the captors as slaves. And they survived not having the stability or the legal ability to protect their families or their relationships. They were sold, and they had no guarantee of a stable home life. So Black women evolved, adapted so that they could survive. And I think any woman who's on this call today probably has some idea of what that would be. You adapt, you evolve so that you can stay alive. So, as a segment of our population, any marginalized segment, just not Black women, ancestors had to adapt. They dealt with the traumas of life and the fact that they lived and survived and went on is testament to their triumphs. Their survival was actually a triumph for them. And all of that history, all of that experience, all of that life is like an imprint on DNA. Each one of us carries that kind of imprint of what our ancestors went through. And Black women are just an example of that. But any marginalized segment of the community has that imprint on them and has learned the skills and the abilities to move through difficult situations and to continue to be alive. Okay. So, and not only has it shaped them as far as their survival skills on the human plane, but in many, it has to have shaped also their spiritual focus, their spiritual way of seeing themselves and life and how they are in life. Okay. So, part of what you and I have now, I look back at my grandparents, my grandmothers, both of who were single moms at points in their life, and I go, wow. And in the early 1900s, that would have been very challenging for anyone. But both my grandmothers went through that at some point. And the things that they did to survive, well, there was no doubt about it. You're going to survive. You're going to do whatever it takes. And that imprint comes to me. That's on my DNA. There's no throwing your hands up and saying, oh, no, I can't do this. No, you will survive. And each one of us has gathered something from our ancestors that we carry with us. And like the river dolphins, we were once free, probably, but, or we will be. And it's this kind of subtle, yeah, I get it. I get it. We inherited something very important from our families, from where they came from to where we are today. And where we are today in our adaptations and our evolutions, we're moving forward and we'll leave those for future generations. A heritage that we've gained, something we'll pass on in our genes to the next generation. What this also, what Alexis Gomes has also pointed out is that each one of those little dolphins uh, exerted whatever they needed to do in order to, as I said, survive, just to be. And each one of them exerted what we know as personal power. Okay. You and I have personal power. Whether we acknowledge it or recognize it or even know about it, we do have personal power. Okay. And so despite being subjected to prejudices and actual limitations in careers or economics or social acceptance, there are marginalized segments of our society who still thrive and but who still strive for equality. Let me put it that way, to have an equal playing field. Okay. She uses as an example, and this made me really sad to think about it, but she points to um, the animals, the dolphins who are a part of the SeaWorld experience. She said, you know, really, they're incarcerated, they're imprisoned, they're not designed dolphins are not designed to live in captivity. They're designed to roam the ocean. And it's we humans that have determined that they're going to live in this captive situation and entertain us. Their natural instincts are to roam far and wide. So, what she finds laudable about the dolphins who are in captivity, despite the constraints of living in such places as SeaWorld, is that they have found ways to continue to form bonds and communities within their group and to adapt to their circumstances. In our human community and on a spiritual level, the ability to work in a constrained situation and not just survive, but thrive is a demonstration of personal power that lives within each of us. Each of us has that ability, and I would say all of us have demonstrated our personal power in being where we are today. It's I can and I will. Okay. So, our ability to continue to work and to produce, to have families, to educate, to create what we have, all of this is a demonstration of our resilience and of the spirit within us, a personal power of spirit within us to continue to work in the world. My last point, I know it's going long and I'm sorry. My last point is sometimes we have been in constrained situations in life for a long time, and we've forgotten that we have choices or that there's something beyond that. There's a different reality. And sometimes we've forgotten how much we have asked of ourselves to adapt to situations or circumstances that are limiting to our human and sometimes our spiritual growth. Sometimes we forget. Sometimes we have accepted as normal the ideas that we can't influence outcomes or that our voices don't matter in the big picture. And that's when and where we spiritually, if not humanly, need to stop and take stock of what we've accepted as appropriate and acceptable for us or for any segment of the population. Because if one of us is not free, then none of us is free, to quote one of the leaders in the civil rights movement. Sometimes we've told ourselves stories about the way things are and the way they have to be, and those stories aren't true. They're not true. It's just somebody keeps telling us that, and the reality is that it's not true. Women are perfectly capable of going to the moon. Women are perfectly capable of running a country. Women are perfectly capable of voting. And that's just an example. Okay. So when we figure out that these things are not true, and sometimes we have to take the spiritual pause to look at them, then we also need to remember who we really are. We're God in form, God in essence. And as Dr. Holmes said, there's nothing but freedom in the universe. Now, we can argue, you can look at things and say, what? But that's the way we were created. That's what we were created to be, is free to be, free to choose. So, where we go and how we do that is up to us. If we were to look at the river dolphins, they chose to be where they are. And Alexis Gumbs said, well, okay, and if you want to use an example of Harriet Tubman, sometimes we choose to be in constrained situations so that we can move with them and change them. I think that's what we need to remember with the river dolphins. But it's something we need to consciously choose. It's a personal decision. We get to choose to be who we want to be, and not because someone said we had to or that there were no other options. No choices based on historical expectations, not because someone said we can't based on gender, race, or faith. It's because we consciously choose. And that's what taking that deep dive and remembering with the river dolphins is all about. So the invitation is to consider what this means to each of us personally. And if we're called, to hear Spirit's guidance and trust that it's leading us to that place where it's good for us and good for everyone, because there really is no private good. That, my darlings, is our lesson for today. And I'm going to take this into prayer, because what it does is it raises all kinds of ideas about things that I want to consider. And I leave it to you about how to proceed. If you are comfortable, good for you. If not, then here's Spirit. And let's talk to Spirit about that guidance. So join me. Beloved, we take this moment to just pause and consider all of this information, all of these ideas that may be new to us today, but are certainly relevant when we consider that any portion of our spiritual body, our community, our humanity is limited by words or thoughts or expressions of another segment of society, then we need to pause and look deeply and remember who we are and remember who our source is. And remember that each of us is a way and a means for Spirit to show up in the world to make a difference. And while we are surviving, maybe even thriving, maybe it is our opportunity to lead into a greater sense of freedom, not only for ourselves, but for everyone around us, everyone in the same circumstance, everyone who identifies with who we are and what we do. So, beloved, this morning we just simply pause and consider all of this, all of these ideas as ways of seeing and being and possibly doing. And we trust that when that deep within calls to the deep, that there is an answer. Is this mine to do? What is mine to do? Where am I called to be? And so we listen, knowing that there are answers and ways. And we accept the courage to act, however it is appropriate. With gratitude then for this understanding, for these lessons, for this community who supports us, we say thank you. And we release this word to Spirit saying, thank you, beloved, for the good and all good. We let it be, and so it is.